Dracula, Chapter 1. The day was bright and sunny. Birds were singing. Flowers bloomed everywhere. But Jonathan Harker felt sad. The young lawyer had to leave England on business. He knew he would miss his sweetheart, Mina, very much. Jonathan climbed into the coach. "Goodbye, my dearest," called Mina. "Hurry back." "I will," promised Jonathan. "If all goes well, I will be home in 2 weeks, and I will write to you every day." The horses broke into a trot. Jonathan was on his way. By evening, he was in London. The next day, he crossed the English Channel. Then he took a train to Hungary. After that, he went on to Transylvania by horse-drawn coach. There were no trains going there. Transylvania was too small, too out of the way. Jonathan looked at the countryside from the coach window. Transylvania was very different from England. The spring air was cold here, the earth was rocky and bare, tall mountains stood out against the sky, dark gray clouds hid the late afternoon sun. The other people in the coach wore woolen cloaks and high leather boots. They spoke little, but they seemed friendly. When night fell, they asked Jonathan where he was going. "Castle Dracula," he answered. Jonathan had been sent by his boss, Mr. Hawkins, to see a man named Count Dracula. The Count had bought a house in London. Jonathan was bringing him the ownership papers. He also carried a letter to the Count from Mr. Hawkins. Suddenly, the passengers looked worried. They spoke together quickly in their own language. A woman with a kind face leaned over and took Jonathan's hand. "Do not go," she told him. Jonathan was surprised. But a man said, "It is not good for you to visit Castle Dracula tonight." "Why not?" asked Jonathan. He saw that the moon was high in the sky. The coach began to go faster. "Because tonight is the eve of St. George," said the man. "All the evil things of the world come out at midnight. You will be in danger." The other passengers crossed themselves. They began to whisper something. It sounded like a prayer. "Do not go," said the woman again. "But I must," said Jonathan. The horses were going even faster now. The coach rocked from side to side. The woman took a cross from around her neck. She pressed it into Jonathan's hand. "Put it on," she said. As he did, the coach stopped. They had come to the Borgo Pass. Someone was supposed to meet Jonathan there. The passengers looked out at the pitch-dark night. They crossed themselves again and again. Jonathan did not want to show his fear. He climbed out of the coach. There was a strange, low rumbling in the air. The wind howled like a wild thing. Jonathan could not see anything in the misty blackness. Even the moon had disappeared. For a moment he wished that no one would come to meet him. Then he could go home, back to England. Suddenly the horses reared up on their hind legs. They whinnied. Their eyes rolled. Out of the dark came a black carriage. It was pulled by 4 black horses. The driver was a big man wearing a cape. His eyes gleamed red in the light of his lantern. "Mr. Harker?" Jonathan nodded. The driver smiled. His teeth were sharp and white. "The Count awaits you," he said. He called for Jonathan's bags. Someone handed them down from the coach. The kind woman leaned out the window. She pointed to the cross around Jonathan's neck. She seemed to be telling him to wear it always. "God save you," she cried. Then the coach drove away. Jonathan climbed into the Count's carriage. He looked at his watch. Midnight. Then he heard a new sound. It was high and sharp, like a long cry. Wolves. The air was cold, but Jonathan began to sweat. "Don't be a fool," he told himself. He touched the cross at his neck anyway. The carriage drove on. Finally it stopped. They had come to a large stone castle. It was so dark and quiet it seemed empty. Jonathan got out. The driver handed down his bags and drove away. Now there was only the wind and the howling of the wolves. Jonathan shivered. The moon came out. It lit the castle walls with a cold blue glow. Jonathan saw a huge door, carved with demons. Should he knock? The cry of the wolves grew louder. They were coming closer. Jonathan ran to the door. He banged on it with all his might. Silence. His heart pounded with fear. Suddenly the door swung open. Standing there was a tall man dressed in black. He was holding a silver lantern. His face was pale. His dark eyes glittered. "Ah," he said in a voice that was both deep and eager, "Mr. Harker, welcome to my house." And he took Jonathan's hand. Jonathan gasped. The Count's grip was so strong that it hurt, and his hand was colder than ice. "Please, come this way." The Count lifted Jonathan's heavy bags easily. He started down a long stone hallway. At the end of the hallway was a large dining room. A fire burned in the fireplace. Gold dishes filled with food were on the table. "Please, eat," said the Count. "And forgive me for not joining you. I dined earlier." While Jonathan ate, the Count looked over the ownership papers. Then he read Mr. Hawkins's letter. "Mr. Hawkins is very fond of you," said the Count. "He writes that you are honest and loyal." Jonathan was pleased. "He also writes that you will follow my wishes while you are here," said the Count. "Of course," answered Jonathan politely. The Count smiled. In the firelight, his teeth looked like fangs. "I know your visit will be an interesting one. But now you must sleep. It is almost dawn." The Count led Jonathan deep into the castle. At last they came to a bedroom. "Rest well," said the Count. "I will see you tomorrow evening." Moments later, Jonathan was sleeping soundly.